inspectingly, while the music from within rose and fell in regular cadences, sweetly impelling and dulling to the senses as strong oriental incense. But Digger was not soothed. The spacehound lunged at one of the globes. Instead of slashing its sides, he found himself sailing through the air toward it. Nat received impressions of irritation combined with astonishment. Within the globes, the music rose to a furious whine, while one of the things shot forth long tentacles from the holes in its side. Lightning swift, they shot forth, wrapped themselves around the body of the spacehound, constricting. Digger writhed vainly, his claws powerless to tear at the whip-like tentacles. Nat severed the tentacles at their base with the heat beam. He turned, strode toward the door, watching the spheres apprehensively out of the corner of his eye, ready to jump aside should they roll toward him suddenly. But they followed at respectful distances, singing softly. Before he reached the door, he found himself walking in rhythm to the music, his head swaying. It came slowly, insidiously, before he was aware, his body no longer obeyed his will. Muscles refused to move other than in coordination with the music. His arm relaxed, the heat rod sliding from his grasp. But Digger! The spacehound sent out a barrage of vibrations that fairly rocked his brain out of his skull. Simultaneously, the beast attacked the nearest globes, tearing fiercely at them. Rapidly, the others rolled away, but two lay torn and motionless, the music within them stilled. Nat reached down, retrieved the heat rod. I think we'd better look for a squeaker. Next time, they might get you, Digger. They returned to the room of the spaceships, seeking one of the small, portable radio amplifiers used for searching out radium. It was known as a squeaker because of the constant din it made while in use. The noise would cease only when the radium was within 100 feet of the mechanism. He found one after searching a few of the smaller ships. With the portable radio strapped to his back, power switched on, he started again down the main tunnel. The globes set up their seductive rhythms as before, but he could not hear them above the discord of his squeaker. Failing to lure him as before, they sought to force him in the direction they desired him to go by darting at him suddenly, lashing him with their tentacles. But it was a simple thing to elude him. Still remained the question, why could they want to lure him into that stinking pool of acid? He flashed a beam of heat at the nearest of the annoying globes. Under the released energy, it glowed, yet did not melt. But the tentacles sheared off and the blue light faded. The flow of music changed to shrill whines as of pain as its rolling ceased. The others drew back. He turned down another tunnel. They stopped at the caves beyond the one where he had found the robot girl. It was sealed by a locked door, one of the airlock doors from the space vessel, firmly cemented into the natural opening of the cave. Nat bent forward, listening, his helmeted head pressed against the door. No sound. He was suddenly aware of the dead silence that pressed in on him from all the sides now that the globes no longer sang and his squeaker had been turned off. The powerful energy of his heat beam sputtered as it melted the lock into incandescent droplets which sizzled as they trickled down the cold metal of the door. The greasy, quartz-like material at the side of the door glowed in the heat from his rod, but no visible effect upon it could be seen. What was that material? He knew, yes, he knew, but he could not place a mental finger on it. He thrust the shoulder of his good arm against the heavy door, swung it inwards, stepped inside. The light of his torch pierced the silence, picked out a human skeleton in one corner. He hurried toward it. No, it was not entirely a skeleton as yet. The flesh and bone had been eaten away from the lower part of the body to halfway up the hips, as though from some strong acid. The rest of the large, sturdy frame lay sunken under the remains of a spacesuit, which was tied clumsily around the middle to retain all the air possible in the upper half of it. Evidently, some acid had eaten away the lower half of the man's body after he had suffocated. The face was that of a Norwegian. By one outstretched hand, a small notebook lay open with the leather back upward. The corners of several pages were turned under carelessly. Nat swung the torch around the room. It was bare. The notebook. Quickly he picked it up. The page on which the writing began was dated on May 10th, 2040. about 2 months ago. Helmar Swenson, my daughter, Helena, aged 19, and I were lured into the maw of this hellish monster by a robot calling for help in our television screen. This thing, known to man as Asteroid Moira, is, in actuality, one of the gigantic mineral creatures which inhabited a planet before it exploded, forming the asteroids. Somehow it survived the catastrophe and, forming a hard crustaceous shell about itself, has continued to live here in space as an asteroid. It is apparently highly intelligent and has acquired an appetite for human flesh. The singing spheres act as its sensory organs, separated from the body and given locomotion. It uses these to lure victims into its stomach in the first cave. I escaped its lure at first because of the squeaker I carried with me. We set up these two doors as a protection from these beasts while we stayed here to examine it. But the monster got me when I fell and the squeaker was broken. My daughter rescued me after the acid of the pool had begun eating away my flesh. My Helena is locked in the room opposite this one. She has food and water to last until July 8th. Oxygen seeps in there somehow. The beast wants to keep her alive until it can get her out of the room to devour her. Here the writing became more cramped and difficult to read. I have put the key in my mouth to prevent the spheres from opening the door should they force their way into this room. Someone must come to save my Helena. I can't breathe. The writing ended in a long scrawl angling off the page. The pencil lay some distance from the body. July 8th. But that had been almost a week ago. He unscrewed the man's helmet, tried to pry the jaws open. They would not move. The airless void surrounding the tiny planetoid had frozen the body. Until now, it was as solid as the quartz cave walls. There was but one thing to do. The other door must be melted down. He leaped halfway across the room toward the door in the opposite wall. Could it be possible that he was in time? Anxiously, he flung a bolt of energy from his heat rod toward the lock, holding a flashlight under the other stump of an arm. The molten metal flowed to the door like a rivulet of lava. The door, hanging off balance, screeched open. Air swooshed past him in a sudden escape from the room. He squeezed himself through, peered carefully about to see a slim spacesuit start to crumple forward in a corner. The girl was alive. He started toward her. The slim figure pulled itself erect again. He saw a drawn, emaciated face behind the helmet. Then, with a fury that unnerved him, she whipped out a heat rod, shot a searing bolt in his direction. He felt the fierce heat of it as it whizzed past his shoulder. In his brain, Digger's thoughts of an attack came to him. He flung an arm around the spacehound, dragged it back as he withdrew toward the door. The girl continued to fire bolt after bolt straight ahead, her eyes wide and staring. They made the door, waited outside while the firing within continued. When at last it was still within, he peered around the corner of the room. She lay in a crumpled heap in the corner. Quietly, he re-entered, picked her up awkwardly. Through the thin, resistant folds of the spacesuit, he could feel the warmth of her, but could not tell whether the heart still beat or not. They would have to take her to one of the ships. Her limp form was held tightly under his good arm as Nat hurried down the main tunnel. Digger apparently realized that the seriousness of the situation, for he received impressions of "must hurry" from the beast and another creature, looking much like him, surrounded by small creatures of the same type, trapped in a crevice. "Aren't you a bit premature, old fellow?" he chided. Halfway there, the globes met them again. The things were not singing. From their many eyes poured a fierce, angry blue light. They rolled with a determination that frightened him. Yet, he strode on until they were barely a foot away. "Jump, Digger!" The spheres stopped short, reversed their directions toward the little group at a furious rate, flinging out long whip-like tentacles. One wrapped itself around Nat's ankle, drew him down. He shifted the limp form over to his shoulder, slipped out his heat rod. Quickly the tentacle was severed. But now others took their